It's a great day for hockey, October 30th, 2025. Today's Shark session, we have no special guests on, just one or two experienced coaches. And the topic I'm hoping to discuss are successful coaches and what separates them from others. What do they do that's unique in terms of their personalities, their coaching style, and understanding their purpose of coaching? In professional hockey, the purpose of coaching is number one, to win. And jobs, the rate of turnover is extremely high. At college, winning is important, but you're developing a student athlete, and coaches are as concerned with their progress on and off the ice, their long-term development to enter the world, to be good citizens, good people, good employees. So life skills become more of a focus. And then we get into elite minor hockey, which most of our guests have been through coaching over many, many years. And we're trying to decide where should the major focus be and what coaches are most successful in minor hockey. And that requires a definition of success. Winning on the score clock is one indicator of success. Now, how you win will determine how you're perceived, how you're admired, or how you're possibly not respected because of your coaching style. But it gets results, and we're going to try to see what coaches seem to do the best, get the most done for the longest term in sport. Hopefully we can have a few guests on soon. Looking forward to it. Take care.
Thinking here.
Go ahead, Tom.
Say the parents organize a trip. Like for us, a couple of years ago, we went to Golden. It's about a 3-hour drive. And if the parents organize it and rent the bus and everything like that, I wouldn't have a lot of things against them being on the bus because it's not a league game and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of an extra thing, and and a lot of it's because of what the roads here are so crappy in the winter that I wouldn't mind that, but I think regular season and playoffs, just the kids on the bus with the coaches.
Tom, do you recall your experience traveling with that U13 team and whether parents came in on some of the trips?
Well, parents go almost all the trips. But I know we went to Golden and the parents drove. And I think that is the place they all got in the bus and we went to a bar cafe thing together and there was a game on and the kids were there and the parents were there.
Yeah.
So I don't, it's like everything. There's not an always, but I think, like going to Lethbridge, my plan is to have my Emily, who coaches our defense, takes care of our defense, and talk to all the defensemen on the way. And it takes about 10 minutes each. It's about a 2-hour bus ride. And maybe some of the other young players, and they come to the front and all the coaches talk to them. I don't want parents listening in on our talks, being part of the talk, because it's, it's a coach-player thing. So, but that's a league game.
Yeah.
And it's hard because I think you're at an age too, like you're talking around that 13 years of age, you're getting to be a teenager. Kids are naturally starting to separate a bit from their parents, not in a negative way, but just in trying to grow and mature. And I think as a parent, it's one thing you have to understand is you kind of got to let them do it, because at some point, mom and dad can't be there at every moment. And as long as they're comfortable that their children are safe in a safe environment and being taken care of and have some measure of adult supervision, I think you got to let your kids grow up a little bit on their own. And generally speaking, well, and I'd be curious of your experience too. Some of the best stories and memories that players have were the bus rides.
Yeah, especially like girls have such a good time on the bus. You know, they sing and they play games and they, you know, and guys do too, but girls are a little more lively with each other. And, you know, that's another reason it's nice for them to be together. Like tonight, we have our big Halloween game. So we have an hour and a half ice time. There's this little diversion, but they all wear costumes, including the coaches. And so we'll do practice kind of stuff the first half hour to warm up, and then we'll have a 45-minute scrimmage, and then a shootout contest where we keep score, just for fun. But it's
You should go, Tom. You should go for Halloween as Wally, and Wally should go with you.
You know what? Last year, Cassie Campbell was helping me coach. She dressed up as me.
That's awesome.
She borrowed one of my coaching jackets from my house and wore the same color of everything that I wear.
Awesome.
Well, listen, guys, I sent an email out last night about wanting to talk about successful coaches. I'm sure you have had great success wherever you've coached. And I wanted to sort of get into a little bit of a conversation about there's three, I think, categories of coaching that we need to consider. At the pro level, you know, the most successful coaches, who can you think of in any sport that are successful, and why were they so successful? Tom, I know you're a college coach in Bemidji, had great success, and I don't know, I'm thinking NHL when I look at Scotty Bowen and Mike Keenan, polar opposites. They had success. So I'm just wondering about, when you think of successful coaches, who are the successful coaches, and what was it they did that was unique, different in terms of their style? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I think at the pro level, there's a dynamic of you actually able to select a certain player, and at that pro level, there is a certain mentality there. So I'm guessing Mike Keaton, for the most part, right, selected players or wanted players on his team, and has talked with his GM, who could take a tongue lashing and improve because of that, not wilt because of that, right? And then Scotty Bowman, I never knew him, but I would think he a bit more of a mix of that and conversation with players. I'll tell you, as far as a modern coach, if you will, I think everything I see about is Rod Brindamore seems to have today's player as a human being, if you will, figured out pretty well. There's a lot of videos of him with his locker room talks and that, how he approaches things, you know, with his players. Because I mean, the general formula, right, is you just find the best players you can and try to win with them. But I think, at least it seems like from the outside looking in, a guy like Rod Brindamore has humanized the sport a bit too, and is more in touch with his players, what they're thinking. Maybe it's because he played recently-ish, right? I'm not really sure the reason, but he seems like he's figured it out, at least getting players. consistently to the playoffs. Not able to quite get across the finish line yet, but I kind of like the way that he seems to present himself.
Excellent point. Tom,
Well, I think it depends the era you're in too, because in this politically correct era, last 5-6 years, all of a sudden, Mike Babcock didn't fly anymore, and Mike Keenan, there's no way in the world, so there, and now Trump is changing the politically correct thing by insulting everybody in the world. And there's a backlash, the pendulum swinging now to be people being nasty. Now, I don't know if coaches can be nasty, but, Scotty Bowman, I met him a few times. He offered Yuso an assistant coach job. And he took us to lunch, and I met him at a conference in Vienna. And I think he was famous for managing the bench, getting the right players out there at the right time. And he also had a bunch of great players, but a lot of people have great players and they don't manage them right. And he had success, especially in Montreal and Detroit, not so much in Buffalo. And and my college coach, we knew who we were and how we were going to be successful. And there was I remember once we'd been on this long winning streak, and our two best D and our best centerman were all with the U.S. team over in Europe, playing at the World Championships. That's before the pros. So mostly college guys, and the Americas had dropped to the second group. And they went over there, and they qualified, and they won. They got back into the top group again. But they were missing, and we played Lake Superior State, and we beat them about 8 times in a row. And we lost 2-1, and then we lost 11-1. Like, it was just unbelievable. It just killed us. So the next week we drove back to Bemidji, about a 20-hour drive. And all we did, we had 3 skates of practice, and everybody knew why. Because our deal was we outworked everybody and we were more fit. And then we had to go back there the next week for the national championships. And the guys missed the first game coming back from Europe. They got back in the afternoon. But we played Lake Superior State in the final. And we beat them by about 4 goals. And we went back to our identity, plus we had our best players. But, so coaches that can sell an identity and everybody understands it, I think is really important.
Yeah, the buy-in piece, right?
Right, Peter.
No, I'm just saying the finding what makes that player tick, like Tom is saying, to get that buy-in, like that's the difference maker. You can have, on paper, the most incredible power play or penalty kill or line setups, but if it's not the right dynamic, if they don't buy into what you're playing with a system, if they're questioning it, then it doesn't work. So that's where I say, like today, especially, I think. I mean, to me, I know early on, if I asked a player to run through a wall, they would run through a wall. Now they want to know why I want to run through the wall. They want to know the reasoning behind it. And if they like the reasoning, they'll still run through the wall. But the players are more cerebral in that way, not just blindly follow direction, which can be good and can be bad because, you can have too many options, right? And if you have too many options, then you run into a problem where you end up a little bit paralysis by analysis kind of thing, right? Too many options. You gotta have a system. You gotta know what you want to go, what you want to run, how you want to run it. Guys got to buy into it. Players have to buy into it, and you have to be able to execute that. And because there's many different forechecks. There's many different ways to attack, but unless you can narrow it down, and everybody buy in, you're not going to be very successful because they're always going to be trying something different.
Well, you see teams like, was it 2 years ago? I think the Rangers won the President's Cup.
Yeah.
And then last year they were like last in their division or something. Same players, same coach. But I'm sure the buy-in wasn't there anymore. I watched them this week, and who's their Panarin? Didn't even know he was on the ice playing against the Flames. And if guys aren't given any effort, why are they doing that? You know, you got to figure out why. Because I think they changed coaches too, as far as I know.
The Rangers swap with the Penguins, and it's funny because the Penguins coach Dan Muse is actually kind of a local guy. He played Division III hockey at Stonehill in Massachusetts, and really one of the hardest working human beings I've ever met in my life. Been able to work with him at a lot of USA Hockey things and that, and he grinded his way through. Now he's the head coach of the Penguins, and the Penguins head coach is the head coach of the Rangers.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Tom, two things about the word identity, and I'm curious about the level it's being coached. And we've been talking about NHL, and success there, the bottom line, is the wins and losses. Tom, I'm thinking about your level and the college level. First, I'll go to the college level. And how do you define success as a coach at the college level?
It comes to the same thing. I mean, you have to win regularly, or you won't be there long. But it's totally different dynamic because you go and find the players, right?
Yeah.
And you can be the greatest coach in the world, but if you're, don't have very good talent, you're not going to win that many more than you lose.
Yeah.
So you've brought all these players in and you've talked to them before they come there.
Yeah.
So you kind of got an agreement with them. You've told them how you coach, how you want them to play, why you like them, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where in the youth level, there's a whole bunch of players and you pick them and you may know some, like in ours. I mean, it's a new draft every time. So, so it's very different as far as your starting point is very different.
Yeah.
Wally, you should move your computer a little so you get your whole head. You're only getting part of your head on the screen. But anyways, yeah, I just think it's still the same. The team has got to have something that you do really well. And our team, we've got the youngest and smallest team in the league, and our whole thing is back pressure. At Bemidji, it was back checking. The back pressure on the puck carrier, because most players at this level, the good players, get the puck and try to go through the world. So if you make a defensive 2-on-1 on them, it's pretty tough for them. But that, your F3's got to come back really hard to be successful on it. And if we don't do that, we're not very good. So we talk about that all the time. That's one of the themes before every game. So, that's part of our identity. And for the first time in my life that I can remember, we have the top 3 scorers in the league right now in 15 teams. We've only played 4 games, but that's kind of because our power plays at about 50% right now.
Tom, that's what I was going to ask you. Is your identity is evolving, and how do you see it evolving and becoming? Then ultimately, what would you like it to see it be?
I think it's always going to be how hard you defend and how you cause turnovers, and then of course you want to move it up quick and all that sort of thing. But the key thing is for me is, they get the puck and you try to get it from them as quick as you can and turn it the other way. And that's all to do with defending well and hard back pressure. So I don't think it changes much.
Well, Tom, what,
That is a team too.
when you drafted that team, like all coaches, they sort of pick what they want relative to the way they coach. So you drafted skill and hockey sense, and I think character as well, behavior, coachability. Is that? Can you talk about the selection process for you? And it's sort of part of the identity you're going to have, because how did you go through it, and what did you end up with?
Well, we really worked. There's 130 kids tried out, right? And you only get a couple of kids you protect. So we added this year, we watched to see if when they carried the puck, did they look to the left? Did they look to the right? Or they just looked straight ahead to try to go through the world? A lot of kids, you'll say, did you see so-and-so over there wide open? They never looked. So we really looked for people that were aware on the ice. And we ended up with the defense that we wanted because they were on the small side. We have four first years. Two of them are 5'1", but they're smart players. They're good with the puck, and that's because we were looking for hockey sense. Because at the end of the day, we end up being the best passing team. Like 2 practices ago, we played a game where we had to make at least 1 pass in each zone. Last practice, it was a 2-second game. And you watched us play. We moved the puck pretty well compared to other teams because of who the players are and what we're, the way we practice.
Well, I was on the ice with Will Pozo's U13 team yesterday. Will's an experienced coach, has a daughter on the team. He's played in Europe, outstanding teacher, but he's played a high level of competitive hockey. And in my role, I'm, trying to offer suggestions about coaching. And he made the point, which caused me to think of this topic. He said, Wally, every coach is different. You can't clone them, just like players. You can't clone them. And what he said was, and he talked about you and your team and your practices. We're all skill. He saw other teams practice, talks about Kyle, talks about Shayla. He said they're all different, and they all play very well. And the thing I got out of that is, wow, I've got to be careful, because I've tried to tell coaches, there are some things that you have to do in terms of behavior, you have to address, and everything sort of is revolves around the effort they put in at doing what you want them to do. And so now I'm thinking, Jay, you do it your way. Kyle's going to do it his way. Peter, you're going to do it your way. So in terms of your coaching style, Peter, what's your style? What's your way? It's different than somebody else that had success.
I really enjoy the teaching portion of the game. I really enjoy it when you have a concept or maybe a physical skill and a player actually gets it. And then you see them apply it in the game. So I've always enjoyed that part of it as opposed to just dictating you have to do this. I mean, there are certain situations where you penalty kill a certain way, power play, you look for a certain thing. Because the power play, I've seen so many power plays with skilled players that are just absolutely horrible because there's no structure to it, and a coach will just tell a player to go out and create, and it's like you give a kid you give 5 kids a room with 100 different types of balls and see how many kids are playing with the same ball. They're not, right? And too many choices can be a really bad thing. So in some situations, I think you have to be a bit more finite in the choices you make. But part of it, Wally, for me, honestly, is I've always thought in terms of long term, like season development of players. I think part of that is my background that I had in horticulture. I mean, there were crops that we grew that might take 5 years before it really looked like anything. In the beginning, it didn't necessarily look like much, but by the time you fed it, watered it, fertilized it, pruned it, you had something. So I always had kind of that same approach. I mean, obviously shortened from 5 years, bring it into a season, but the growth of that player, how do I get that player to grow if in fact they can, right? And that's where you give them all that same type of opportunity, but that's why sometimes you have first line players, I'm talking at the college level, and you've got fourth line or guys that struggle to get into the lineup. But as long as you try to nurture all of them the best you can in their abilities, and nurturing doesn't necessarily mean that you coddle them, because again, in growing in horticulture, sometimes you got to take out the pruning shears and chop them back pretty hard.
Well, Jordan Fenton's joining us, and it's going to give Jordan a call here. Good. Hi, Jordan. Anyway, hi, Jordan. Jordan, we've just been talking about successful coaching and what people do at different levels. And Tom talked about team identity and his team's identity. And it's interesting because, I sort of look at Tom's coaching and his style and the identity in terms of how he coaches. And he selects players based on skill in the hockey sense. But then, Tom, when you mentioned identity, he referred back to his coach at Bemidji, stressing back pressure and 200-foot hockey. And he said that's part of their team's identity that he reinforces every day. And it is a big reason for their success because he's got so many first-year players that if they don't work that hard, they're not going to be successful. But we've talked, minor hockey, elite minor hockey, which is what we've all been involved in primarily, about coaching and identity and your philosophy in terms of achieving success. And you've done that many years, and some years are more difficult than others, but I think philosophies sort of are the same. We can't change who we are, how we coach. We can only adjust and adapt and learn, but I think my coaching style hasn't changed over time. I learned something when I was coaching high school football that affected me for the rest of my life. And that was I didn't know anything about football, and I coached a team voluntarily because they didn't have a football coach. And I learned, I studied, I learned the sport and got help with just studying it, using video and breaking it down, and then bringing in good help. And then when I got successful, here was the turning point. I won a city championship, won a second one, and in the third one, I decided in the playoffs to two-way my running back, my fullback, and my tailback, and I replaced one as a DB, and and the other one took over a linebacker spot, and we didn't win. The impact of that with the team and the effect on it, I was trying to do something different because on paper it seemed like it should work. And I'm glad it didn't because I'm going to lose just coaching the way I've always coached. And I found that I didn't change the way I coach. So, Jordan, can you talk a bit about identity over the years and your player selection and what you look for, and then trying to come up with an identity that your team personifies?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Wally. And I think that, like anything else, it kind of evolves over time. That you find out what works for you, and yeah, as you said, that there's some things, your core values, and that don't necessarily change. But some of those are established early as well, and I think that it kind of goes with the profession that I'm in education. I didn't want to be a teacher originally, and but it kind of was a profession that found me. And so when first teaching, I looked at, well, what were the things that I felt made the teachers that I enjoyed learning from successful, and what were the things that I disliked about other teachers, and tried to kind of blend, making sure that I was doing more of the characteristics of the good teachers. And if I ever caught myself doing anything that those teachers that I didn't like were doing, I stopped it immediately. And I think it's kind of was the same with coaching, that I looked at how I was treated as a player growing up, and I wasn't the most skilled player, but I was definitely a player that worked extremely hard. And so those players that, or those coaches that rewarded hard work and being of good character and a good teammate were ones that I gravitated more towards than those that, if you made a mistake or something, stapled your butt to the bench. So I didn't really feel that I was getting the opportunity to develop when sitting on the bench. So that kind of made my philosophy that way, that if I'm going to be a developmental coach, that everybody has to have the opportunity to play in all situations. That being said, I recognize that I probably wouldn't have been a power play one forward in my playing days, but there was always a role for me. And so that's the other part, is finding roles for players. So when it comes to selecting players, of course, you want the highest skilled players you can. And like you mentioned with Tom, those ones that seem to have high hockey IQ and some hockey sense, and those pieces. But the other piece that came to me a few years ago, Wally, that I've kind of weigh as much as I possibly can as well, is the character piece. And I always kind of now look at the idea of when people are selecting players or running a camp, and they're sitting up in the corner like a scout would and watching it from the corner, and that piece, yeah, they can catch on to the hockey side of things, but they need to get themselves on the bench and seeing how the players are interacting with others and seeing how they respond to actual coaching or direction and some of those pieces. And if you can identify those character pieces, I think that you'll go far too. And it doesn't necessarily amount to wins and losses in the stats page at times, but it does go a long way for development. If you've got ones that are all willing to work, in the long run, it will even out or level out. But it might not get you the immediate wins. And as you talked about with your playing your players on two ways, I've found that's win-lose coaching. That, yeah, you might win some games, but overall you're going to lose your dressing room, and so that's a part of it. And I think that you had Daryl Belfry on quite a while ago, and one of the things that he had said that I thought was kind of an interesting litmus test is if you come across your players years down the road and they pretend like they don't know you, that's probably not a good sign.
Well, I think that's one of my key points here. The most successful coaches over time in the world in sport, I think of the obvious two to me are John Wooden and Claire Drake. And I'm talking success in terms of winning consecutive national championships. And it wasn't their talent. I think it's the way they coached and their perspective and philosophy of coaching. And I think that when I brought the topic up, we talked about Scotty Bowman and Mike Keenan in a professional game. And there you're coaching to win on the score clock, period. And yet the people that have won the most on the score clock, and I can include Phil Jackson in that and his national NBA championships, they appeared to have a sense of perspective in why they coached, and they walked the talk how they coached, and were consistent. And it had more to with the growing of the athletes' mindset and their character, and lending, that led to them winning championships. So I'm always mindful of Wooden being asked the question about, after winning, I think, his ninth national championship by a reporter, but what did he think of his team after winning a championship like that? And he said, ask me in 25 years. And I think that's the reminder that coaching elite minor youth hockey, that we can look at the score clock now and win and lose now. We're going to win or lose. I know one thing. We're going to learn more by losing than we are by winning. But when you think of the very, very best, and I throw Jackson into that category, Wooden and Claire Drake, and there are many others that have been sustained their success. In college coaching, it gives you a bit of perspective. And most of the players we've coached, guys on this call, they're going to go to school. They're going to get an education. It might not be university. It might be a trade school. But they're going to leave that sport and they're going to be better at something when they leave it because of it. So I just wanted to bring that up in terms of the coaching, because I think in minor hockey, and I call ourselves minor hockey coaches, we pressure ourselves looking at the outcome versus the process and what we're doing to build the character and live the identity that we want our team to be.
Well, Wally.
Yep.
I want to interject here because I was lucky enough to coach with one of the best coaches in the world, Yursinov. And what happened is, I think it was in '98, that's when the pros got to play and all this. And the team, basically, the players, NHL guys, refused. They were going to refuse to play for Russia if Tikhonov was a coach. And Yursinov had been his assistant, and Tarasov's assistant. He played for Tarasov then as assistant. And anyway, they got Yursinov was the coach, and multiple world championships and Olympics after that. And he is such a pleasant guy. Like, he jokes around. The players love him. And as in a contrast of sternness that like Tikhonov wouldn't let people go home when their father died to a funeral, stuff like that. And, so that's consistent with what we were talking about. He knows the game. And the other thing is going on, I did some stuff with him before, and on the plane, he'd be there with his notebook just all the time doing stuff, a little hockey notebook with diagrams and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's really important that you cover everything. You can't be having a timeout and talking to your players, and it's the first time they ever heard it. You're going to talk about a 6-on-5, you better have practiced it. Or if you want to talk about tactics. So I know George Kingston, what he did, he had a list. And every time he worked on something, he checked off. He gave it, he checked it off. And he had that list to look at, have I covered this season? So it's really important to cover everything too. It's not just being a nice guy and everybody loves to go there and all this, because, you also have to be meticulous on make sure you cover everything.
Tom, I want to share a story about Tikhonov. I was working with Dave King in '88. Tikhonov's on the bench. They did win the gold medal again, of course. He's coaching the best players in the world. Oh, we didn't have the best players in the world on Team Canada. But Tikhonov was a bastard. And I remember after scoring a goal, looking at his bench, he was giving the players crap like you couldn't believe after they had scored. And, when you think of the Soviet Union and the coaching style, and many of the players came up through the Army elite team in the Soviet Union, he had success. And the score clock, I'm not sure that players appreciated him as much as they should when you coach. But it's so true. You said it well. You got to be a good person, treat them how you want to be treated. But what you said about every detail, it just can't be spur of the moment paying attention to it. It's got to be part of your seasonal plan. And I think if you're coaching at the level you're coaching at, Tom, U15, and you're, of course, thinking of all those details, it blows me away. So, Tom, have you worked
I got to run out, let my dog out. He's going to pee.
Okay. So,
I'll edit that part out.
okay. Jordan, what are some of the details that at your level you need to pay attention on now, continue to grow in and get better at, that might lead to more success?
I'm not sure, Wally. I think that the biggest one that we're finding now is that individually, skills wise, that lots of coaches and players have been working on that for so long that these kids have probably never been more skilled than any other generation individually, I believe, but they don't know the game. They don't know how they fit into the game as a part of a whole. So there's a lot of 1 versus 5 hockey players. But that's probably the biggest thing that we need to work on as coaches now, is to help them understand how they fit and the strategy of the game and those sorts of things. Like I think that there are many of us that were students of the game by watching the game. And well, I don't know what the data is now on attention span, but it's shrinking. And these players now, I don't know if any of them watch an entire game, male or female. They watch a lot of TikTok highlights or snippets, and they'll watch people practicing their individual skills. but they don't watch an entire game to see how plays are made and to understand pieces. And they want to learn it when you take the time to teach it, but it does take time to teach it.
Time is the biggest factor of all, and I'm not sure. I wish I was young and coaching like you guys, because I think the tool that you've got at your disposal, Instat, is something that we haven't learned to use to its fullest. And Jordan, in that regard, when you say players don't watch a whole game, well, I know they don't. I know girls don't tend to watch hockey on TV, but in Instat, they can look at their own shifts. I haven't even figured out how to access the shifts. But if you look at your shift, you can see what you did well, and you can see what you have to do better. And that's more important than you telling them what they did well and what they have to do better. They have to be aware of that. So my suggestion to all the coaches where they're using Instat with young players, Tom, at the U13 level, I would say one shift looking at it with their parents, or one, they're all broken down, all their shifts, and their dad can watch it with them and they can talk about it. What did they like and what they did better? Nothing more needs to be done. There's a conversation, there's a looking at it, and there's a learning from it. So I think that's a tool that might pay off in the hockey sense side in terms of making them be more aware of themselves, the situations that they're in on the ice. They have more time to execute, and that's their skill. Creates time and space to execute. So that's just my 2 bits worth about having more success. It's part of what coaches, we're responsible for their being the best they can be, which is what success is. And right now, it's a tool that I think I'd be getting on the bandwagon of if I was coaching with players who just seem to be 1-on-5 players and missing opportunities and using their teammates. And even lack of effort on back check. They can identify that in a shift. And they can look at that, not with you telling them, but watching it themselves, hopefully with their parent at U13. And at U15, I'm not sure. They might look at it with their parents. They might look at it themselves. But if they're not looking at it at U15 and U18, the best players look at it. They know what they're doing. And they want to look at themselves perform. And that's sort of what we have got to get them to appreciate is what are they doing? What are they thinking about what they're doing? And what could they do differently? Any comments on that, Peter, the use of video and effectively and how it's worked or not worked for you?
Well, I think one of the important things to do with that is I like to ask a player, what do you see in your game here at this point? And if that player, and this can be really revealing too, because if that player says, well, so-and-so should have been over here so I could pass the puck to them, I've got a little bit of a red flag there, because my question to that player has been, when we're talking about you and your ability to take ownership on what could you have done to make it more effective. Because one of the things that I think drives me a little personally nuts is a little bit of terms. I think no one should ever tell young players to spread out, and they should never tell them to get open. Because especially at the youngest levels, you'll be behind someone, and there'll be 3 people in between you and the other player, and they will be sure that they were open because that's what you told them to do. If we're playing CFL and you're behind the defensive back, yes, you're open because I can throw the ball over your head. But if you're not in a position where you're available, then you're not open, if you will. So I think the
It's
verbiage,
between being open and being alone, right?
right, 100%. And then the whole thing about spread out, so the kids all spread out all over the ice, and then there's nobody to move the puck to because there's no puck support. But again, going back to your question, Wally, yes, when someone says, "Hey, Peter, look at your shift and tell me what you saw," if I say, "You know what? If I had pulled up here and moved to this area, I could have got the puck to Tom because Tom was in a pretty good spot." That's a player I'm going to want on my team. But if I say, "Well, Tom wasn't helping me. I don't know. I was all alone with the puck. I didn't have anybody to pass to." So I think it can be a really good tool in many ways. I think it can be a learning tool for sure, but also a revealing tool as well if you're paying attention to what's being said.
Peter, I'm not sure I understood what you said, but
Yeah.
you said don't tell them to get open.
Right. I don't like the phrase "get open" because, again, especially at the youngest level, while you can be standing there and Tom can be 10 feet directly behind you, I can be in front of you. And at the youth level, a young player, Tom feels that he's open because there's no one near him. There's no one within 10 feet of him. But I can't pass a puck through your body.
Yeah.
So getting available, being in a position where I can move the puck to Tom, that's what I want my players to do at any level. I want them to be available for a pass in a spot where I can get you the puck.
Okay, if you ask that player, "Are you open?" What do you have to do to get open?
Yes, exactly. Explaining about keeping your body in between the defender and you and your teammate so you can.
No, you're not defending. You're getting open. You need to get in an open lane.
No, I'm saying get in between you and you and the defender, right? If I'm on the wrong side of the defender, I'm not going to be able to get a pass. I'm not going to be available. I have to get myself in, like you said, an open lane, but get yourself in a position where I can get you the puck, be available to where you can receive a pass. That's the thing because I've seen kids come to the bench, flapping their arms, telling the coaches or the teammate, "I was open. Why didn't you pass to me?" You're not open. There's nobody near you, but there's no way I can possibly get you that puck.
Well, Peter, I'm going to share with you a coaching clinic thing I do that I want coaches to do with their team. And if you can visualize coaches standing on the four corners of the blue lines facing the neutral zone, the players in the middle stationary, and the head coach has the puck. And he said, "Are you open? Get open." In other words, nobody's blocking the view of the passing lane. They're going to move. And then the coach passes to another coach. The coach handles the puck and has to wait until they get open and ask them, "Are they open? What do you have to do to get open?" And that's the beginning stage of awareness of what getting open means. Because I think we know what it means, that make themselves available. That's a term that the Quebec Federation used years ago. Make yourself available, get open for that puck carrier. So it's not a case of you moving to a good area to pass from. They've got to find the open ice for you.
Sure.
So the receiver's the timer, and that's one of the things that I think. That's why we have 1-on-5 hockey. People don't know how to get open, don't know how to support the puck, and it can be taught. So
Yeah, I mean, it should be taught. That's one of the things I see at the youth level, especially with the younger kids, like U10. We've all seen that player that can take the puck and they just lug the puck, and just because maybe they're a bit bigger than the other players, or they skate a little bit better, they just try to stick handle and skate through everybody, and they have some measure of success just simply because they're able to do that. But when everyone catches up, they don't know how to play the game. And I've seen that kid disappear many, many times over the years because they were never taught to play the game and they were allowed to just do that. Very
Yeah.
frustrating.
Well, Tom's philosophy of coaching is he demands passes. And if you demand passes and count passes and have rules where people are stationary on the wall and they're on your team that you can give the puck to and get open for, you're teaching the concept of getting open. Now, when he picks his team, he's picking kids that scan the ice, that look, and he's getting U15 players. Now, U13, this is where I think we really have to emphasize it, and you have to begin to teach that idea here at U11. And I think it is one of the neglected areas because we still play 1-on-5 hockey, but I'm pretty impressed with the work I've seen going on with our GNC coaches and the players attempting to use each other. But
Yeah, and the other piece of that too that I've been kind of tracking too at a lot of different levels is the play after pass, I call it. Right? So I pass to you, you're available, but I pass to you and I can complete the pass, available in terms of being able to complete the pass. So I complete the pass to Wally, but there's a player 3 feet away on Wally's back. So Wally has no time and space to do anything with that puck. Being able to see through layers, and maybe Wally's available, but maybe that's still not the best option. So that becomes another layer, another level as they get older to understand that now there becomes a quality of your pass to the person who is available. Is it still a good pass to make when you see that once they get it, they literally have no option?
Tom, you and Yuri, you came up with 4 thinking principles for hockey. I think that simplifies what we're talking about. Can you elaborate on those 4 things? Because I think we tend to think of hockey as just having the puck.
Well, it's what the Finns and the Swedes organize everything based on. Is that they call them the 4 game playing roles. So the first one is your individual skills. The player with the puck, the skills they have, and that player. And then the second one is players on offense. You're on the other players on the ice that don't have the puck, and that's what you're just talking about, getting open and supporting each other. And how do you develop those skills? And then their third playing role is the closest player checking the puck carrier. So all the skills involved in, defensive one-on-ones and angling and, surfing and all those sort of things. And then the fourth is team defense. So, how you play together as a team. And that's how they basically organize everything. And then they say you're either on offense, about 2 even teams, you're on offense about 35% of the game, which is about 22 minutes, I think, or something, 21 minutes. You're on defense about 35% of the game. And something we don't pay attention to is the puck is loose about 30% of the game. So how do you win these loose puck battles? How do you support, the first player is checking, what do the other players do to be available offensively or in a good possession defensively? So that's how they conceptualize the game, and and our whole coaching system is based on that. I co-wrote with you, so.
So how do you get players? How do you teach players to think the game, conceptualize the game, so they can play the game better?
Well, first of all, they have to have the skill. You know, you can teach a power play all you want, but if they can't make 2 passes in a row, it doesn't really matter. You know, and then so you have to have the skills, the basic skills, and then you just go through the different situations. You know, to teach it. Like we did the 4-chamber attack at our last practice. So the 4 chambers, I was teaching you want to set up a 2-on-1 on the widest defender most of the time. So you start off with 2 players going, and the one passes to the other who gets between the dots with the puck. The other one takes the ice behind, and there's 2 players, you know, working, supporting, attacking together. The other player is going hard as they can to the post. That's another chamber, the middle chamber. And then the wide dot chamber, that's where usually the weak side D will come in. So you attack with 4, and then the 5th player at the back. So we got through the first 3 in our last practice. But, you know, so you can teach these concepts, but you have to have a way to teach them. I even think that's a Darryl Belfry thing, I think it might be.
How have they done with a 4-chamber attack?
Well, we just practiced it like 2 days ago, so
Yeah.
it's a thing like Peter's talking about being open and being alone. So if you don't have close support, it's really hard. You get the puck, and everybody's over there, and you're being checked. You know, especially if you got back pressure, and there's nobody helping you. You have no close support whatsoever. It's really hard to make a good play. So you basically got to dump it in or take a long shot or something like that. You know, so that's what we're really trying to get, is that there's close support, and we'll just see how it works out the games. You do these things and you talk about them, and you know, smart players pick them up.
Well, I've got a thought here when you're talking about that, and that's it's about the light bulb. The light bulb is often off in our brain. How do you get the light bulb on in our brain? And I think it gets down to looking at how you played.
Well, you know what the best thing we could be doing, in my opinion?
Yeah.
You get a bunch of clips of Gretzky playing with Curry. Because that's that right there, and TJ played against him, eh? And he said they'd always come, Curry'd get the puck wide, he'd go between the dots, Gretzky would go in behind him, he'd get the drop pass, and then Gretzky would reach over the blue line with the puck, and Curry would be over the blue line before Gretzky, and TJ said that was so hard that the guy with the puck wasn't over first, you know, and they always created 2-on-1s. Always created 2-on-1s. And I know in Bemidji, that was a thing they talked about, create 2-on-1s on the widest defender. And watching them, and then their left winger would be going as hard as he could to the post, and Coffey would slip into the, you know, come up as a 4th attacker, just like I talked about the 4. They were playing this 4-chamber attack all the time.
Yeah.
And so it'd be great to have a series of clips of them or any, you know, whoever else does it well to promote close support.
Yeah, you're right. That you can never watch enough video of the great ones and learning from them. I think people like looking at themselves, and they might be frightened once they start looking at themselves. I know when I had coaches record themselves on the bench, it's an eye opener. The light bulb goes on. They weren't aware of their loudness of their voice and the yelling and telling that went on versus providing concrete suggestions loud enough for the players on the bench to hear, not yelling. So interrupting with the players' minds on the ice. I think it's really, there's a lot to learn from ourselves by listening to ourselves and watching ourselves. I don't care if you're a coach or player, and I think right now that's generally not done. We're all leading and telling, and everything we're saying is good. But I think if we want to make a bigger inroad and impact performance, I really think there's potential to Instat and the players using it with a little bit of feedback coming to the coaches from the players on their own shifts. What do they see? What do they think? And let the chips fall where they may. But until their light bulb goes on, you've got no power in your house. So you've got to empower them to think for themselves and figure it out. And that's going to be the true art of what you do. So I'm so impressed with the work ethic of all of our teams at practice. I think the work ethic of the teams at practice is phenomenal. At the U13 level, we began with one coach who'd been there a long time that set the standard from day one and expectations. Every drill is high tempo and correctly done, and the other two have finally come around to demanding focus and effort in the drills, and it's starting to be reflected in the games. And it's easy to yell and scream, but they haven't been. They just raise their voices and encourage them to work hard and compete at practice. I think that's all we can do is just work on their effort and reinforce the respect for the importance of paying attention and putting in the effort to get better every time they step on the ice. Jordan, all your hockey coaching, teaching, education, leadership, what's the parallel between teaching and coaching? Good teachers and good coaches.
Well, I think it's comes down to one word, and connection. And it comes down to coaches being willing to make appropriate connections with their players, and being invested in their players. And I think that same with teachers, that right now we're just coming off of the longest ever strike in our province's history, and we've got 3 days here. The message has been the same to all my teachers: use this time to create connections again. And teachers are frustrated and with the way in which we were legislated back, and they're going through their own pieces with it. But the biggest thing is you can see that yesterday was a tough day and today is getting a little bit better. I'm going to pop off this call and head out into the hallways and classrooms and see the connections that are being made again. And so that's what it comes down to: meeting the players where they are, or meeting the students where they are. And it's a little different in a classroom where you don't get to choose, but a great reminder to coaches, and even a reminder to myself at times, is these are players you selected. So if you're getting frustrated with a player that you selected, you need to figure out how to reconnect and how to make that connection stronger, where they will believe in you and you can continue to believe in them. So that's where it comes down to, for me, Wally, anyway, is that connection piece.
Well, how can you better connect with your players?
Well, it's that comes with establishing your connections early on, and establishing that trust, that they can trust in you before you trust in them, technically. But it's work. They're relationships. You have to get to know your players on a personal level, and get to know bits and pieces about them. It's kind of one of those things that a mentor teacher said to me a long time ago. He said I was teaching what at that time they call it remedial math. So it was people that struggled a bit with math. And he goes, so I was bringing in things that were relevant to them. And he said, working in a rural community, he said, and talking about horses and things like that. And he said, I goes, I don't know whether they ever actually learned the math, but he goes, they knew about my horses. They knew about everything about me. And he goes, I got to know about them. And he goes, they gave it their best effort. And that piece. And so I think that's part of it, Wally, is that you have to get to know them. I know that I had a teacher that I worked with that had played professional at the highest level, and he said that there was a coach, and I won't name them because you would all know the name, but he said he played for this coach that was recognized as a really good hockey mind, but he said, if I saw him away from the rink, he said, anywhere in the city, he said that person wouldn't even acknowledge me. And he said we actually played for our assistant coaches because they were the ones that made the connections. He said that head coach, he goes, at the rink, he would be the one that would tell me what I was doing wrong or tell me what I was doing right. But he said, when the person wouldn't even acknowledge you in a crowd in anywhere else in the city, he said that made it a little tough to actually feel like you were meant anything to them.
Yeah. That's a question I have about one-on-one with players. Tom, you've got your bus trips and you've sat down and done one-on-ones with players, but have they only been related to X's and O's, tactics and team play?
That's sit down and ask them how they're doing, where they go to school, what, this kind of stuff. Try to get to know them a little better. That's part of the deal. But, it's so much more difficult. Like, coaching college, you have your own dressing room and all that kind of stuff. We practice consistently at one rink on Tuesday. And of course, there's girls, so I can't go in that dressing room. But on Thursday, we practice, I think, with 4 different rinks. So tonight we're at Max Bell. Last week we were at Crowchild, and the week before at Henry Viney. So it makes it more difficult when you don't have a consistent place. So that's why I find the bus trips, that's when the players are there and you get to talk to them. I just, at this level, and in college I used to talk to them a few times a year, just see how things were going, how school was going, and all that sort of thing. But,
Peter, what did you do to get to know your players better?
That was a big thing with me. Initially, what I did was I would hand out an index card with questions on there that, were somewhat generic, right? Mother's name, mom's name and dad, brothers, sisters. Then we got into hobbies, favorite foods, what do you do away from hockey, your favorite movie, the list went on and on. So that I began to get a sense of who that kid was. And that helped me too, even in when I was putting some lines together. You'd be surprised when people have a certain measure of commonality away from the hockey piece, how it manifests itself on the ice in a positive way. So I did that. Community service was huge for me too. Division II hockey, which is what I coached, they keep track of community service nationwide. And we actually, for one, it might have been 2 years, I think one for sure, we might have been tied the second year. We had the most community service hours of any men's ice hockey program in the United States. We had something at school called the Swoopy Award because we had this giant eagle costume, and the mascot's name was Swoop. So they named the award after him, and it took into consideration athletic success, academic success, and then your impact on campus. We won that 2 years running. So we spent a lot of time in getting to know the players, and I'm still on texts with guys now that we're on the team that, at this point I'm removed 10 years. So getting to know them was more than worth the while. More than worthwhile. I've got 3 guys that when I coached at prep school were are now American Hockey League coaches, and we're still on a text chain together. And I make sure I get to their games, and they give me tickets and all that good stuff like that. But it's huge. You just got to spend the time because it's a lot of fun getting to know these kids. It really is. And then if you're fortunate to be able to follow up on what has happened to them in their lives, the marriages, the career choices, all those things. There's a lot more to being a coach that you can get out of it than X's and O's and winning and losing games.
Jordan, there's a number of teachers back in my day that actually exchanged letters with players, Christmas cards and those kinds of things. It's quite amazing. Like they have this personal connection. I couldn't do it. I did with certain people, 1 or 2 of the students maybe that were having difficulty or I seem to relate to, but I think there's some teachers that have a tremendous capacity to authentically know and get to learn about their students or their players more than what we do usually. So I think that's a good point there. And when you were talking, this was the Montreal Canadiens, but it has a story to do strictly with the chemistry of your team. And I don't know, Jordan, you can think about this one, but Wayne Halliwell was a sports psychologist for the Canadiens, and they had the players write down who they would want to go out to a movie with, who they would invite over with their family for dinner, and who they'd want to be with in a bunker at war. And those 3 symbolic issues, they connected the dots of all the players. And if any players were disconnected, nobody wasn't connected in any way, shape, or form. They made a point as a coaching staff to get them connected, whether it was in terms of roommates or social events, grouping in classroom sessions, and the result paid off. It's just an interesting exercise to get to know the difference in the team in terms of who they really get along with and who they want to be with, and their companies that they're looking for.
John Cooper borrowed that one, Wally, with Tampa Bay, and I saw it, and I've actually used it as well. And you figure out really quickly who your players are connected to each other, how they're connecting to one another, and there's some that aren't surprises, but there's the odd one that's a surprise. And then I've also got a listing of descriptors that I put together that players can use, and they have to pick a teammate of who fulfills the descriptor. I wish I could find it here right away, and share it with you. But it was really interesting activity for the kids, and the great part about it is that when you go back through it with the team, that every single player on their team hears a positive description of themselves, and they hear how their teammates see them, and that's a good one too. But yeah, that connection piece is so key. And going back to what you said about some teachers connecting where there's Christmas cards and those sorts of things, well, that's not quite where I'm looking at it. The connection piece, I'm looking at kind of like Peter's talking about, that you have a conversation with each kid or each player. And I know that Barry Midori always talked with every kid every day, making sure that you chat with, try and make that connection every day, especially in those short-term competitions. And that's being a mentor in those short-term competitions. I always ask the coaching staff after the first few activities and things when their team is together, I ask the same question every year, and it's, is there anybody on this team that you believe is alone? And I always get the question back, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, look at your team. Is there any one player that is alone by choice, or alone have isolated themselves, meaning alone by choice, or alone by being isolated by their teammates? And that's an important thing to recognize as a coach, that your team, are they connected to one another in that way? And for me in a school, it's always, it doesn't matter whether it's been a school that my current one of 450 kids or one of nearly 1,000, I would tour at lunchtime to see if there were any kids that were alone, because the number one way of students being successful is having a connection in the building. So you look, there are some that are alone by choice, that they've been in classes and they don't want to be around anybody at lunch, so they're sitting reading a book or just being alone by choice, and you check that out. But are there ones that are alone not by choice, that they've been isolated or they don't really have a connection? And so then that's where you try and support them. One of my assistant principal this year, it was pretty cool that on the first day there were students that were all brand new to our school. So being a smaller school, she gathered those ones all together and put them together at the same table at lunchtime. You're new, you're new, you're new. And she put them all together so that they all were all going through it together, and as new students. And some of them now we're seeing that they're connected to each other. So it worked out well that way.
Well, Jordan, having worked with you over the years and knowing as a principal when you were at the elementary school, I'm not sure if you do the same at high school, but you greeted the kids when they got off the buses at elementary school. And I think that's huge.
I've done it at every school, Wally, as an administrator, because it was something I recognized an assistant principal did when I was a student, and he was the same assistant principal at our K-12 school my entire 13 years there. So from kindergarten through grade 12, and there's two parts to it. One is that it does allow you to create connections with the kids. The other part is that especially at a high school, you might be the first adult that they actually interact with in the day. So giving them a good morning and a smile is a pretty easy piece of currency to getting them and setting the tone of them coming into the building. And then the third piece with it is just that piece of recognizing, are there some students who are coming into your building that maybe are dysregulated already? And so when you figure that piece out and how they're arriving, you can look to support them in how they need to be supported. But it's a real easy connection, a place to make connections. And do you get a good morning out of every single kid at the high school level? Absolutely not. But some kids, a grunt as they're walking by is a connection. It's in one way or another. And so it's one of those pieces that, yeah, it's an easy way to connect. I know that Peter Smith talked about with his McGill team that it became regular that they all said goodbye to him. That when they were leaving the rink, he was in his office and every single player said goodbye. And he said that it became just something that their leadership core taught the next grouping of players, and he said it worked out great. He said I was able to make a connection with each kid as they were leaving, and he goes, those ones that needed to hang around and ask me a question, they felt they could. And it's that piece I think is really important.
I have to mention, when I was working with Hockey Canada, went to Montreal and spent a lot of time in his office before and after practices. And what you said about the comfort of the players coming in his office and talking for a moment, going back to the dressing room or coming in and out, it was so natural and authentic. It was amazing. And it was his personality of the way he communicated with his athletes. And Jordan, the one thing I want to mention, I've never ever seen a coach except you who arrives at the rink and leaves the rink, probably one of the earliest arrivers and one of the latest to leave. And in the leaving, it's acknowledging the kids and saying goodbye to them. I know myself as a coach, I had trouble getting there just early enough for everybody. And now you got to be there much earlier. They're dry land training before games, or maybe they're doing a warm up dry land. I don't know. But the time you spent before and after acknowledging them is huge. And that's something Dave King has tried to get his staff to do with the national team. Spread out the duties. Everybody had to talk to every player had to be talked to at a personal level by the coach during the practice, before, during, or after. And it's something that's worth noting. And I think we're so caught up in the X's and O's and talking about we need to do this, we need to do that. We forget that human side. So good on you for doing that.
Well, last night I didn't hang around real long last night. We were debriefing with Craig and wanted to catch the last couple innings of the Blue Jays game. So we quickly hustled out of there to get over to Big Rock, the closest place with a television. And so, but yes, it is something, and I know you've asked me that one before, and when it comes to with the kids at the U18 level, especially, it's that many of them are driving themselves. So I always want to make sure that they at least are able to get on the road after things without a problem. And so that's part of the method of the madness of staying till the last one is leaving, is making sure that they're safely on their way. I can't make sure that they get home safely, but I know that they can start safely and that their vehicle starts and away they go. So,
George, can I get you to share your story? I was mentoring with you, and the girl had a flat tire in Okotoks.
Oh no, that one wasn't in Okotoks. I think the Okotoks one was, we ended up boosting a vehicle there, Wally, but. And I ended up boosting a vehicle outside of Max Bell that wasn't one of my players. It was a player from the other team that we'd played, the other fire team. But the flat tire one was at Father David Bauer when I was coaching the AAA team for the first time, and had a player that, same thing. I saw they were the last two to leave, or relatively last two to leave, and so I'm going out to my own vehicle because I know there are no more players left in the dressing room. And I walk out, and here's two players that are basically standing, staring at a flat tire. And I'm like, what, are you waiting for it to miraculously inflate itself or what? And they said, no, we don't know what to do. And I said, well, do you have a spare? And the owner of the car turned to me and goes, if I were a spare tire, where would I be? And I said, well, probably in the trunk. And so we got looking around, and sure enough, there was the spare. And I said, I'm not changing this for you, but I'll make sure that you safely get it changed. And so went through the process of changing the tire, and I made sure that the lug nuts were tight for them to make the trip home on the spare. And so away they went. And a few days later, I got an email from the dad of the player that was a lengthy email, but thanking me for taking the time to support his daughter in changing the tire. And he was quite a car guy, and he said he went and got the flat fixed, but they needed to change it back onto the car. And he said, my daughter wouldn't let me do it. She said, I need to make sure that I'm able to do it if I need to again. And he said, so she let me sit in a lawn chair and supervise her changing the tire back to being on her car. So she learned a skill that way, I guess.
Yeah. Tom, any personal stories like that in your teaching school? Your personalization of opening up to the kids outside of the X's and O's?
Well, throughout the years, there's lots of things. Nothing pops to my mind. I think I had a special relationship with the women's team at Mount Royal, because a whole bunch of them are still on my Facebook, and I read about. Back when we played Grand Prairie, one of my former players, her daughter was playing for Grand Prairie. She's their top scorer right now. But I get, happy birthdays from them and everything like that, more than any other team. I was there for 5 years, and I had a lot of them for 4 years in a row too, right?
Yeah.
But not that popped to the top of my mind right now.
Well, you talked about Mount Royal. And how many years did you coach Mount Royal?
I was there 5.
Okay. So you got a chance to work with the same athletes for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And
But I was thinking of a story from Mount Royal. I had one girl, she was there my first year. Then my 4th year, something happened to her and she missed for a month. And we didn't win a game that month. We lost more games that month than I'd lost total the first 3 years. Because I think we lost 2 games. We've only played like 20 games. 2 games and 3 games and 4 games or something. We lost 9 games in a row. And a lot of it was my goalies couldn't stop a basketball for a while. But, and then she came back and we dropped from 1st to 4th place. And then we went on a winning. And she'd scored about the most 4 or 5 goals in a season. And then come the playoffs, so we're playing the first place team. And we beat them. I think it was Grant McEwen. And we beat them. We ended up losing in the finals. But she set a record. She scored 12 goals in the playoffs. And it was unbelievable. She scored more goals in the playoffs than she had her previous 4th year. And the team, and I never realized how important she was to the team until then. And, so sometimes players can go under the radar if they're not spectacular, kind of whatever. But I think she had a huge influence in the dressing room. And so just saying that it's hard to be aware of everything that's happening, but there's some things happening in the background that you may not, as a coach, realize how important some player is.
we know Jordan and Tom, that story, your story, and I'm thinking of that Wayne Helliwell thing about who would you have over for dinner, who would you go to a movie with, and who do you want with you in the trenches, I'll bet you she might have been in one category with every player on the team.
Yeah, she probably was.
And I think that's something to find out. Just for that, you can underestimate the positive influence of the camaraderie of them getting along and respecting her to that degree. And in your case, I think it's worth experimenting with, even at your age right now. And I don't know, you might come up with some different examples, like instead of being in a bunker at war on the guy's side, you can say you got to dig up a bunch of potatoes. You're going to do hard labor for an afternoon or something, or help you mow the lawn, or this kind of thing. But I'd be curious about that. That's a very interesting story. And Jordan, have you ever experienced anything like that? That players left and suddenly returned, and you realize how impactful they were on the team?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, as Tom mentioned, that there's the odd player that is kind of one of those glue people that stick kids together, and of course we look at formal leaders on teams and work hard to make sure that they're growing and in understanding their role as a leader. But sometimes there are those players that just simply are the type that glue people together, and they are the ones that are the conduits to the connections for everybody, and it's kind of fun to see that, and but and I guess some of the NHL teams and some of those pro baseball teams, and that you can tell that the ones that are functioning at the highest level, that you might sometimes question, why is that person on their roster, and but then if the truth be known, it's because they're the ones that keep everybody else going.
Dave King.
This year, what we did, we met with every player or the whole coaching staff, and one of our questions, because we were trying to decide on captains, they each gave us 4 names of people they thought would make good captains, and that kind of gave us an idea of who people looked up to on the team.
Dave King mentioned Theron Fleury when he coached the Flames. He said players followed him around. He was a magnet for the team. His energy, his humor, his wit, and his competitiveness, it was something that he brought to the team that he noticed away from the rink when they were on road trips. And that's a good point. The selection of captains, and Jordan, have you picked your captains?
Yeah, well, we have, and we do something along those lines that, like Tom did, that we ask for players' input, but we do a leadership thing and talking about, well, what is a leader, and what are the attributes of a leader that you would want to follow, and then going to it and having them think of who they feel are leaders on the team and why they would follow them. Because I guess ultimately the first one, when we start talking about leadership, it's the whole piece of what does a leader need to be a leader? And there's only one thing. And of course they start listing off characteristics, but what is the one and only thing that a leader needs to be a leader? Is followers. And so it's what makes you want to follow them. And you say that if person, there may be people that think that they're leaders and nobody's following them, they're not a leader. Or the opposite. There are times in your life where you don't want to be the leader, but everybody else is following you. So it's that piece. So, but yeah, I did find that piece that you were talking about, Wally, And so here are the 5 that I put together with it. One is foxhole situations. When you find yourself in need of an ally to join you in a battle, who would you want with you? The other one is night out. If you were going out to the movies or for a social situation, who would you want to join you? Family time. If your family was having some time together and said that you could invite one person to join you, who would you want that to be? Study time. If you needed to complete an assignment or study for a test, who would you ask to help you? And then the confidant. If you needed someone to share your thoughts or feelings with, who would you choose to chat with? And so those are the adaptation to what you had. And then the other ones that I had was kind of a pick a player, choose one of your teammates to fit each of the following descriptions. And so one was like Swiss Army knife. They're prepared for any situation. Eddie the Eagle doesn't take no for an answer, is trying to be at their best. Silent but deadly. On the quieter side, but fierce when need to be. Elsa can remain cool as ice while under pressure. The Energizer Bunny only has an on switch and keeps going and going. Feel the Beat plays a physical style of play, and the opposition always knows that they're there. Kleptomaniac is always stealing pucks from the opposition. Jack in the Box, you know that there's a surprise coming at any moment. You Are My Sunshine always brings a positive attitude to everything they do. Elastigirl, Mrs. Incredible, super flexible in all situations and can adapt to whatever is needed. Speed McQueen, everything is done at a high rate of speed. Queen's Gambit, they're playing chess, not checkers, always thinking and playing one or more moves ahead of the opposition. Cool Runnings always finds ways to make her line mates or pairing better as a group than individuals. This beauty is a beast, great teammate off the ice and a fierce competitor when the puck drops. Blades of Glory skates the game with ease, makes it look effortless. The Berlin Wall, the last line of defense, who stands in the way of an opponent every chance that they get. Behind the camera, never looking to steal the scene, but their efforts behind the scenes will make the team shine. So those are things, and the kids can pick players
Jordan,
to go along with
can
that.
you send that to me?
Yep, I can.
Do you mind if I share it with everybody? Because that's priceless. And I think, like, the art of coaching is coaches will pick, they'll get something out of this, thinking about their team in a different way, realizing behind the X's and O's, this is what matters. And these are what I think the great coaches, the successful coaches, they're able to find the chemistry of their group and put the strengths to the biggest advantage they possibly can. And I think that's just tremendous, Jordan. It's so good to have you on. And Peter, have you heard anything like what Jordan's talked about before and applied that in a formal way?
I have a lot of similar things, not to the entertaining piece of Jordan being in tune with everything from kids' movies to music, but in terms of the idea of getting them to respond to those types of questions, yes, for sure. And again, it just speaks to the importance of more so than the X's and O's, because, well, and you brought up the point very early on when you were mentioning how you didn't know anything about coaching football, but you were able to teach yourself, learn the X's and O's part of it. And I think that holds true today with, again, so many of the young coaches that I see, very good at the X's and O's piece. But where you fall short in actually creating a program instead of creating a team. The team is the X's and O's and the skill players and all those things they need to do. But a program is things like Jordan talked about, you mentioned, like Tom talked about the veterans as they go through the process, the standards remain the same. That's when you know you've created an actual program. And doing all these types of things, getting to know those players, having them understand that you care, that there is value, that there are standards, and then them grabbing a hold of it. And something as simple as saying goodbye to the coaches. That's something that when that group started that on day one, and it's 10 years later and it's still doing that, then you have the satisfaction of knowing you actually created a program and it wasn't just a team. So I love all this stuff. I mean, this is so important. It's more fun, if you will, as a coach, because you get to be creative as a human being and you can win a lot more games with it.
Well, I really like that. You sort of tied the bow to the Sharks call, summarizing everything like that. And Jordan, thank you so much for coming on today. As usual, we didn't have anything that specifically we wanted to go to, and initially I wanted to talk about successful coaches and what they did that was unique and different. And I think we've discussed things that we all can get better at. And coaches out there listening to what we're saying will appreciate the importance of the scope of what we do as coaches in terms of communicating and getting our messages delivered in a way that inspires people to be better. So I want to thank you guys all for coming on, and looking forward to editing up this into bits and pieces. And you guys have a great weekend. Craig Parrott is off to the national championships with the U18 provincial team, so I'm hoping to get to a few more different games at different levels to watch. And looking forward to the U13 games, of course, that I'm primarily responsible for. So all the best. Have a great day. And Jordan, welcome back to the building, and the staff and the kids. And pretty soon they'll be just in the swing of things, and they won't be thinking about in a negative way about what's been going on and what is going on. They just as teachers, like usual, you just keep your heads down and you do things the best you can for the right reason. And I think that's why we're educators and coaches. Okay, guys.
Thanks,
Take care,
Wally.
gentlemen.
Take care.
Yep.